Good morning, everyone. I'm running a little bit late here. I apologize. I was up very late. I did a late night stream on the second channel last night, so running just a tad bit late. I stayed up a little bit after that, so thanks everyone for being patient. Please give it the old like, share it on the old X machine. I appreciate it. We're going to be coming through with episode 76. We got forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden joining us here this morning. He is going to be the one on the stand in the Phil Spector trial. He is making his return. We've seen him already. And again, he is the husband of Linda Kinney Baden, who is one of the defense attorneys of Phil Spector. And again, a friend of a lot of people who are in the Buzz Nation here in the YouTube streets of true crime. So it's going to be an interesting morning. Thanks everyone for coming in, and let's rock and roll.
Let's rock.
Boom. There we are. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for coming in. I appreciate it. Still trying to wake up here. Still trying to get myself going. Alarm went off at 8:30. That's my normal, That's why I'm always late, because I don't get up any fucking earlier than that. Need to turn the spirit up. It's already getting out of control. And I was like, nope. I was laying in bed when I sent out that tweet. I was like, pass it on. I'm not making it right now. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for coming through and being patient. I really appreciate it. Actually, I'm going to make a post here right now. I'm going to put my link in here on X. Because I haven't really made any kind of proper post. Even though, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Well, the shares definitely help. The shares definitely help. You'll get people that come in here that, like, oh, shit. Thanks for the share from so-and-so. See, let me go here. I'm going to go, let's rock. That's a good one. At least there's something out there. I saw Shelley shared it earlier in Discord. Hopefully some people come through from there. I'm not going to spam it all over the place this morning, but yeah, thanks everyone. And then also coming through immediately this morning, as soon as I woke up, I saw this in my Venmo. Kathy coming through with a 420, passing the plate for Pastor Steve and Gypsy. Thank you so much. Really love that. Let me get you on here, Kathy. Oh, yep, there you are. Got you right here. You are starting out the new will this morning. Let me start this thing with some bells after I give you this love. Yes. Let me give you some bells. Hold on. Where them things at? Where them bells at? There they are. The bells, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate that. Sheila, what's up? Good morning, Sheila. Good to see you in here. All the way from Ireland, baby. Pastor Steve drinking too much of the church wine. I've been in the basement getting the wine going. Haley Mouse, good morning. No judgment here. I often roll out of bed at 4 p.m. Whoa, okay. I used to do that way back in the day. I haven't slept that late. My body hurts now. I'm going to be honest with you. If I sleep too long, my body hurts. Like, I want to just keep laying there, but my neck, my back, everything's just fucked. Yeah, I'm glad everyone understands. Everyone knows. We got them bells rocking and rolling. Thanks, everyone, though. Love it. I'll give you some.
Hold up. Respect my house.
Love that right there. Some old school Martin, baby. Factual Lie coming through here. Jesse coming through here. We did get a will spin on Feral Friday. Everyone came through and made sure that happened. I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. And Lisa from Australia won that. She's already won a shirt in the past. She's also won some trinkets, so she's on a roll. She's doing pretty good, which is awesome. And I love Lisa. She's been very supportive here. She's also killing the game. She had some big streams yesterday. Pokemon Shelly, good morning. I saw that she was loving the Sabu stream. I did a wrestling stream last night. This wrestling legend died last weekend of a heart attack at the age of 60, and his career was absolutely insane. He was one of the craziest wrestlers of all time, absolutely. I mean, he did not wrestle a match where he did not destroy his body. And I think it kind of shocked some people, and it was like, what is this? That's him every match. I could pick any random match from any year, any time, and it's going to probably blow your mind. Oh man, let me see if I can get this name. I'm not Leah. I'm just calling you Leah. That's right. She didn't care. Leah, what's up? Good morning. Motion to scream. Good morning. BG Brooklyn Wildside. Looks like everybody was in here a little early. Pokeball was in here letting them know though. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Bonnie Bailey, I hope you're doing good. Good morning. Good to see you in here. Oh my God, dude. I'm 38 and I can't even. Here's so that stream last night. Just for I know everybody in here wasn't in here, but it was a guy that just destroys his body, literally throwing himself through tables. Doesn't even need to be anybody there. He's just destroying himself. Those guys from wrestling and even sports and fighting, but wrestling, when they start to get this age and on, they're still going. Like Sabu's last match was 3 weeks before his death. Like. These guys just I don't know how they get out of bed in the morning. Like, they have to be doing the craziest drugs to make that happen, because I don't do that much stuff and I'm getting out of bed like, oh, you know what I mean? It's insane. But yeah, I'm glad everybody's in here. We're going to be starting out hot. We're going to be, again, we got Dr. Michael Bodden. Everybody knows who that is, I'm sure, forensic pathologist. And we got 46 minutes. I think there's 2 parts of this. We'll see how far we can get here this morning, because I do got a couple of things going on. I'm going to be doing this today. As soon as this ends, I'm going to be finishing a video for the second channel, which is close, and hopefully that releases about 3:45 Eastern today. And then tonight, I have another stream on my second channel. Really trying to get the streams rolling over there and getting more eyes on it if possible. We'll see what happens. But I'm doing some wrestling from 1989 at night on Wrestle Plunge as well. So yeah, got a busy day of some work ahead of me, some fun. So, cooking dinner and listening. Where are you at on planet Earth, Leah? Yeah, that was a normal thing for Sabu. He put himself through tables. I don't know what the hell. Good morning, Carrie. Good morning. That's the truth. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Anybody that does come through with any kind of supers, of course, that will get you on a physical wheel that I spin. Memberships are appreciated. That could get you in this right here, the book club. Every Tuesday night after Murder Church, we have a book club. We're currently reading The Stranger Beside Me, Anne Rule, Ted Bundy book. Incredible, actually. Really enjoying it. We have a lot more to go, and any of those past episodes are just littered with deep notes. So you can really get a good feel of the book, even if you don't want to read all of it and just kind of jump in with us. Other than that, I'll be keeping an eye on all of the Cash App, Venmo, PayPal right up there. All of that, Venmo, Kathy hit me earlier with that. I really appreciate that. I will keep an eye on that throughout the show, and we'll see how we can do. And otherwise, let's rock and roll, my friends. A Murder Church. Boom. I'm going to move that over here, right next to it. Boom. Move that right here. Boom. I like the way that look. Right there. Here we go.
Session.
All right, all parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness are present. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Let's go.
Dr. Bodden,
why have they
before
brought back Bodden?
Took a break. We were talking about you being on a board for the state of New York called the Correctional Medical Review Board. And
yeah, I'll give you some bells. I'll give you some extra bells. Hold on now. I don't mind passing out more bells, Carrie. They can hear those all the way down the street. They're like, Murder Church just started. Damn, he's running late today. Son of a bitch. Thanks so much, Carrie, for being here.
you've been on that board since 1973 to present, is that correct?
Yeah, it was set up right after the Attica prison uprising, in which caused by, in part by medical deficiencies, so that Governor Rockefeller set up a board to try and avoid it in the future, and it has.
Okay, and this medical review board for the prison state correction medical review board, the jurisdiction goes beyond state prison, goes into county jails or county and city jails, correct?
Yes, this is under the governor's office and has jurisdiction over all jails, lockups in the state.
Okay.
Hey,
And,
Sheila, thanks for
were
that
you
share.
appointed-
Really appreciate
Were you just
that.
appointed once, or does this come up for review once in a while?
Comes up every 4 years by whoever the governor is. The governor appoints the members.
Hey, I don't mind.
Okay, so
So-
if
I
it-
don't mind
It's a 4-year
passing out
appointment.
bells.
Okay, so when the 4 years is up, if they reappoint you, you stay on, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been reappointed since 1973 to this board.
Yes.
Dr. Bodden, when this board reviews
Linda's still
medical
sick.
issues
Can we get an
within these
update? Doctor, can we get an update on your wife? How is Linda?
lockups or jails or prisons, whatever the case may be, do they ever get involved in, if there's a death, as to determining the manner of death, whether it's a suicide, a homicide, or an accident?
Yes. The reason the board was set up is that initial jurisdiction for the prisons is in the county of the prison. But the complaints by prisoners had been is that they weren't doing it right. They were covering up deaths in the county. So the governor set up a state board to oversee this that was at a more of an arm's distance and that would hopefully not have the same biases that a local
Is it just me, or is the sound like not matching his mouth?
agency would have. So our jurisdiction is to review the initial county decision and to change
so it's like
anything that we think needs to
weirdly-
be changed. And that's worked out well over the years.
Okay.
All
And
right,
so,
maybe I'm crazy.
if there's a death in custody situation, you would, do you ever get involved in actually doing autopsies, or do you just review work done by others?
No, we initially review work done by others, and if we feel it appropriate, we'll do a second autopsy. We'll exhume the body, do a second autopsy, or
Or a Tina?
yes, as the case may be. Each case is evaluated on its merit.
Okay. And now the second board that you've been involved in is the New York State Mental Hygiene Medical Review Board, is that correct?
Yes,
And that's been since 1976 to the present time?
yes.
Does that operate similar to the state board?
It's similar, but it's a different agency. This is a mental health division of the state, and they fund various mental health agencies throughout the state, mental hospitals, and the same issues had come up in those hospitals and those institutions, that families felt that their loved ones weren't being taken care of properly, that deaths were being covered up by the local jurisdictions, so that the Governor Cuomo, I think, in that, set up this board to have an independent review of deaths. That's not a criminal matter. That's for the families' concerns, and their complaints would be addressed.
Okay. So essentially, as with the in-custody type board that you're on, this would deal with people that are in mental institutions where they're in these facilities, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And would they be, do they sometimes die in those facilities, and does that come under the jurisdiction of your review?
Yes, all deaths are reviewed, and medical care is reviewed
Okay.
to make sure that everything's being done right. And it's an oversight. It oversees to make sure that there's no, that any death or any medical care is not improper.
Okay, so these would be this would be psychiatric as well as medical care, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and are there situations in these state mental facilities where somebody dies and you're reviewing the manner of death, whether it's an accident or homicide or suicide, something along those lines?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have the same jurisdiction and authority to do a second autopsy if that be called for?
If it were called for, yes.
Okay, and essentially, you mentioned that the state jail facility board has a number of members. What's your role in the mental health board, or this mental facility board for the state?
Well, it's similar. It has a larger number of physicians and health professionals than the correction board, and I'm the only forensic pathologist on the correction board, but I'm one of a number on the mental health board.
Okay, and I take it now you're on that board presently, along with the other one. Is that true?
Yes.
Hey, look at the way those hearts and thumbs are leading right into Murder Church and Publicly Buzzed. That's pretty dope. That's totally by accident.
And you've got a half-time position with the New York State Police. Do you get paid anything for being on either of these boards?
No, those are pro bono appointments.
Okay. Now, other than these two boards, do you have any governmental appointments from New York State or any
Shelley,
other
thanks for
states
that
matter?
share.
Yes, I've been appointed in various states to be consultant.
What the fuck was up with this last night with this Brooklyn Bridge thing? What, this Mexican naval ship? I saw that it lost power. I saw Lauren's reporting on it, but what the fuck? 2 people had died, I saw, and like 77 injured. Something crazy. Like, what in the hell does this happen?
In individual cases that may come up in the state
Scary
that
as hell.
the governor may be concerned about, such as the death of Medgar Evers in Mississippi in 1963. Mm-hmm. He was shot about 4 months before John F. Kennedy was shot. And as a courtesy to the state of Mississippi,
pirate ship,
were asked
right?
to exhume the body, do a second autopsy. That led to the conviction 30 years later of the fellow who did the shooting.
Okay, so this was something that the state of Mississippi requested and you were
Yes.
involved in?
Yeah, they requested, we did it as a courtesy from the New York State Police to a sister agency, and were able to help resolve that problem.
Okay, and you were the one that did the autopsy in that particular circumstance?
And I testified in the trial, yes.
Okay, anything, any other state
take out the
appointments
freaking bridge.
or affiliations with any
Cars
state
like going right
agencies?
by
Or
there.
Well, I've been involved, and I'm presently involved with a number of states in investigation of criminal cases. I'm involved with a number of federal agencies, Justice Department, the FBI, the Veterans Administration,
Yes,
where I have done a lot of investigations
crazy.
into multiple deaths at veterans hospitals that were suspicious,
Okay.
including exhumations and testimony.
Okay, that would be on the federal level, I take it? Those
That's on the
agencies.
federal level.
Okay, well, let's talk more about that then. You mentioned something about the FBI. What appointments or affiliations do you
The
have?
Federal Bureau of Investigation is a super criminal justice agency, but it doesn't have its own forensic pathologist. So when cases come up that require interpretation of autopsies or re-autopsies, they have to go to outside forensic pathologists, and I've been involved with a number of investigations with the FBI and the Department of Justice, including going over a few years ago to Zimbabwe to do exhumations on bodies that an American physician had killed a number of patients in Zimbabwe hospitals, and it turned out he'd also killed a number of patients in U.S. hospitals that were not recognized at that time. And that was one of the cases that I did a number of exhumations and participated. He pled guilty, so I didn't have to testify, but in federal court.
Okay.
But a number of cases like that.
So the FBI they've contacted you over the years to help them with the work that they do?
When they need the services of a forensic pathologist, yes.
Okay.
That's not pro bono.
Okay. Now, Dr. Bodden, have you ever heard of the National Crime Information Center?
Yeah, the FBI and Department of Justice some years ago had established a unit to set up a program to identify the unidentified dead in the United States. That is, each year there's a certain number of people who die who are not identified. And
Micah, morning.
they convened a group of people, mostly forensic dentists, but also a few forensic pathologists, to set up a document to be able to be filled out by all agencies in which there are unidentified remains, so that it could be put into a computer base and hooked up with missing persons reports to identify
I wish they had
people.
maybe I missed it.
who
Why
are
is he back?
identified.
Okay. Was there also a committee that was that you were on and appointed by the
Yo, life artist,
United States
morning.
Department of Justice, the FBI,
Welcome in here.
on missing children.
You can see Phil Spector in the corner over
that
there
was part
trying to
of
pass
that,
out on us. No, actually, if they zoom in, he's probably just fucking dead-eye and fully ghouled out, ghouling over next to his attorney there, fucking fuckface rosin.
That unit, yes. We involved with missing adults, and then we
out.
also involved with missing children.
Okay, so you set up a
I'm
system
gonna
to
put
try to
the
identify
Crypt
missing
Keeper with that
children.
wig on his shirt.
A system for unidentified
I'm not going to say anything
remains
else, just that.
to go into the system, and a system for missing people to go into the system, the living people and dead people, and try to hook them up together.
In other words, if somebody's reported missing and then having something to try to tie it if they find some remains?
That's correct.
Okay. When was that done, Dr. Bodden?
That was about 15, 20 years ago.
In the 80s?
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, have you ever had any special governmental appointments from the United States Congress?
Yes, the main one was in the late 1970s. I was appointed the chairman of the Forensic Pathology Panel of the United States Congress Select Committee on Assassinations. That was set up in 1977 to reinvestigate the death of President John F. Kennedy. And
I knew we were
later,
going there.
the investigation of Dr. Martin Luther King was also set up as a separate panel, and I was the forensic pathology person in charge of both panels.
Okay, when you say you were in charge of both panels, you were the chairman of the forensic pathology panel. What were your duties that you did for the United States Congress for these two panels?
Our panels which composed of just forensic pathologists, reviewed all the materials available concerning the death of President John F. Kennedy, the autopsy reports, went down to the scene of the shooting in Dallas. We interviewed any doctor who had anything to do with the treatment or autopsy of President Kennedy at Bethesda. Went over all photographs, went over everything in the National Archives. There's lots of material in the National Archives, including the car he was driving in, and
BGOG in the house.
to re-evaluate the cause of President Kennedy's death and the trajectory of the bullets that struck him, because as of 1977, there were still a lot of questions that had come up about the way in which President Kennedy was killed. So we spent our time reviewing everything, coming to a conclusion as to, and writing a big report. One of the volumes in the report of the Select Committee Assassinations is of the autopsy report of President Kennedy.
Okay, and so basically you did that at the request of the United States Congress, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were appointed by somebody in Congress or this committee in Congress that was looking at it?
I was reported by the chairman of that committee.
Okay, the congressman that chaired that committee.
Shelley,
correct?
like, what is...
Yes.
And did you also, what did you do with reference to the
I just don't
investigation of the
know,
death of Martin Luther King?
There was a separate
Like, I swear, any trial I've ever watched, all of them, but this one, you get a witness, they come up, it's relevant to what's happening, you know where they're at. As long as you're paying attention to the trial and the case, you're good. This one, they're all over the place. So Dr. Kenner, Michael Bott has already been up here in the early days of Murder Church, really early. There was a whole controversy because of Linda being his attorney, whatever was going on. And now now he's back, and instead of just out the gate, it's about referencing this, in accordance to Alana Clarkson, the person that the trial's about, that's been murdered. Why? We already know he's an expert in this court. What is happening? It's like what I always say.
investigation into the death of
See if I
Dr.
can swing
Martin
it
Luther
into
King
Lana somehow.
because there were also issues as to
Right?
his death and whether or not
Right? How many times has Kennedy been brought up in this freaking trial? For real, dude. Like, it's insane.
He died of
Whose trial is this?
as the official version was, or whether there were a cover-up. So we looked into both deaths, and there were different committees, different people on the different panels. I was the chairman of both, and gave our reports to Congress. It took us about 2 years.
Okay, so as with President Kennedy, Dr. King, you issued a report to Congress.
I think you're right,
the
motion to
committee that was
scream.
investigating.
I think it was like, wasn't there like a tooth or something? Like, whatever the fuck, that side trial thing. No, I think you might be right. He might have been a part of that. So maybe now they're bringing him in a part of this. You might be onto something there. You might be onto something.
This.
Yeah, and that also was a volume
I think you're right.
included in their final report.
Okay. How long were you involved in the investigation of Dr. King's death?
The two investigations last about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Not full time. That was I still worked in the New York City Medical Examiner's Office,
What's up,
but
LS?
it
Welcome
was
in here.
continuous
That's
over
pretty cool.
2.5 years.
Okay, so you weren't working like 40 hours a week or anything on that?
No, forensic pathologists always work more than 40 hours a week, but it was.
We never stopped
A
working,
continuous
brother.
investigation by a number of people. There were, I think, 9 people on the John F. Kennedy investigation.
Oh, it's all coming out.
All forensic. I was the only
That's
one who
what
wasn't
this
a
is really
chief
coming
medical
down to.
examiner. I was a deputy chief in New York City, but all were chief medical examiners, and there was a 3-member commission that looked into the death of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay, and so as chairman of these forensic pathology panels, did you try to get others to work with you on these panels, to work with Congress to present these reports?
Yes, we.
How did the other people get selected?
Well, I was selected initially, and then I gave recommendations for other people who would be of stature and helpful in investigating the deaths. And people were very cooperative. It wasn't hard to get them to come aboard.
Okay. Was this considered kind of a prestigious assignment to work on one of
that's
these
awesome.
boards?
Love that.
Prestigious, but worthwhile, because all forensic
Really appreciate you coming
pathologists
in here,
know
Les.
about continuing debate on how President Kennedy was killed and how Martin Luther King
Whoa.
killed. And to the extent that we can clarify that is something
sides.
that's really helpful for the public
Cool
good and
indeed.
for posterity, for people who are going to look at this 100 years from now.
Okay. Do you know a gentleman by the name of Dr. Werner Spitz?
Yes.
Okay, was he involved in either one of these panels?
Yes, he was on the John F. Kennedy panel, yes. And he
Oh,
had...
he's my tag team partner.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Spitz was the most interesting witness yet. That's the one that I couldn't get enough of. And yeah, he was worked on Kennedy.
And he had previously been on a panel, I think, by the Rockefeller panel or something,
Right.
that
pretty cool.
was in existence before Congress set up a panel. So Dr. Spitz was one of the people who had already made an official investigation on another commission, who then came aboard in our commission and had a lot to offer from his prior experience.
Can you recommended him for work on the panel that
Yes.
you were the chairman of?
Yes, and that's back in '77, yes.
Okay, and why would you recommend somebody like Dr. Spitz back in 1977 to do that?
Well, for one, even in 1977, he was an outstanding forensic pathologist.
I'm going to sustain the objection, and if you want to come to the bench, you may.
I'll ask another question. In any event, with reference to this particular chairmanship of these panels, you served the entire period of time and did the work that Congress asked you to do in both of these investigations, both as to late President Kennedy and the late Dr. King. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Did both of those investigations involve weapons of some sort?
Yes, both involved rifle wounds, yes.
Okay.
Dottie?
Dr. Bodden, as far as on the federal level, you mentioned something about being involved in Veterans Administration investigations.
Oh, shit, I
and
just-
does that
I just popped it
have
on
to
the
do with
screen,
some federal
so-
agency in the federal government of our country?
Yeah, the Veterans Administration,
that.
the United States Veterans Administration, and they have an internal investigation group that looks into any suspicious death in a VA hospital. And when there is a suspicious death, I've been involved with a number of the investigations into whether healthcare professionals were causing death of veterans, and if so, how to correct the situation.
And how did you get involved with doing that type of work? In other words, what caused that to occur?
I got involved in the late 1970s when there were some suspicious deaths in an Ann Arbor Veterans Administration hospital in Michigan, and the investigator for the Veterans Administration had known of my work in New York City and asked if I could review some of the cases, and truly turned out that two nurses had been poisoning patients at that hospital and involved
That's way more common
exhumations,
than
and
it should
then
be.
they were able to correct
Still
that
see stories
situation,
like
and
that.
when other similar situations occurred.
Dude.
And
I never
these
would've been in a
occurred in
position where I have
lots
to
of
trust
hospitals,
any
but
human.
the VA hospital is the one institution that brings them out, because most hospitals, when a healthcare professional is doing a bad thing, wants to get rid of the healthcare professional without making a fuss about it, because it leads to lawsuits and bad public relations. So the VA hospital has been very outspoken if there's any death in a hospital, and I've been involved with about half a dozen or more
Wake it up.
investigations with them.
And so would you be hired by somebody in the Veterans
Dude, Micah,
Administration to do that?
Too
Yes.
often.
Would that be something that they would pay you in your private capacity to do?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I didn't ask you, but when you did your work for the United States Congress on these boards, both President Kennedy and Dr. King, was that a paid position?
Yes.
Okay. And with reference to other federal governmental appointments, have you done anything else for any other governmental agencies that we haven't talked about?
Well, I do a lot of lecturing, for the Drug Enforcement Administration and other federal invasion. I worked with an international federal agency, ISATEP, and have gone over investigated deaths and lectured in Bogota, Colombia, and Panama, and other South American, Ecuador countries.
Okay. Have you done anything internationally in the field of forensic pathology by other countries? Or
Yeah, I guess internationally, I was one of a team of about 5 people who went over to Russia, to Siberia, in the early 1980s, at the request of the Russian government and the U.S. State Department, to look into the remains that were thought to be Alexander and the Romanov family, Nicholas Alexander, the Romanov family, who disappeared in 1918, and remains were recovered in the Ural Mountains in Siberia around 1980, and there was issues as to whether this was the Romanov family that had ruled Russia for 300 years up until 1918 or not. And I went over with a forensic anthropologist and a DNA expert and a forensic dentist, and we examined the remains and were able to show that they were the Romanov family and that they died of multiple gunshot wounds. That involved largely skeletal remains, but not completely.
Okay. And how did it come about that you got involved in that type of work for the State Department and the foreign government that you just explained?
Well, I think that when the remains were found, the Russian government, there was a lot of dispute within the Russian agencies as to whether this is a Romanov family or not. There were a lot of biases. They had royalists, people who wanted the return of the Tsar, and there were others who disputed the findings that these people could have been the Romanovs. So they asked our government to send over a group to resolve the issue, say, is it the Romanovs or not the Romanovs? And it largely came through a forensic anthropologist, Maples, who was a consultant to the New York State Police, forensic anthropologist, who put the team together.
Okay.
Bill Maples.
Is that something you were paid as in your private capacity for? Is that something you did?
No, that was pro bono.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, I now want to shift focuses a little bit and ask you about, in the field of forensic pathology, are there professional organizations that forensic pathologists belong to, and do you belong to any of those organizations? And if you do, if you could explain which ones you belong to and why.
Yes, the main forensic medicine organization is the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I've been a member for a long time, a fellow. I was the vice president for a time. And another Society of Medical Jurisprudence, which is the oldest medical legal society in the country, which I was past president. And I've been a member of other medical and medical legal organizations.
Like, for example, the American Medical Association, AMA?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, why do forensic pathologists want to become a member of certain organizations? What's the reason for that?
The reason that the organizations serve a purpose in trying to keep forensic scientists, forensic pathologists up to date on the latest happenings in the field, the latest research. And all the various organizations have annual meetings in which papers are presented on new research being done. And it also provides a means of meeting other colleagues from different parts of the country, so that when there's a problem, they could communicate, networking among the different forensic sciences and different specialties.
Okay. You classify yourself as being a forensic pathologist. How many doctors are in the United States compared to how many forensic pathologists are there?
There are approximately 850,000 medical doctors in the United States, about 15,000 pathologists. There are 24 specialties, 15,000 pathologists, and of the pathologists, there are less than 400 who are full-time forensic pathologists.
Such as yourself?
Such as myself and Dr. Pena and Dr. Spitz and Dr. Mayo, yes.
Okay. So it's a relatively small
and
group.
Dr. Lakshmanan, yes.
A small group compared to all the doctors in the United States, is that correct?
Yes, it is not a very popular specialty, although those of us who are in it love it.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, with reference, you mentioned something about these scientific conferences and meetings that papers are presented. In other words, is that the way that the forensic pathologists communicate with each other? They share their information in some way?
Yeah, that's one way. There are journals, there are conferences, are the main ways in which they're sharing of information among forensic pathologists and forensic scientists and the different disciplines of forensic science.
Okay. So the American Academy of Forensic Sciences has different disciplines within it, is that correct?
That's right. That gives the forensic pathologists a chance to communicate with the toxicologists, with the forensic psychiatrists, with the forensic lawyers, with they're forensic engineers, people who are involved in public investigations and public matters.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that part of the keeping up with the field is publications. Have you ever published anything in the field of forensic pathology in your career?
Yes.
Give the jury an idea of the number of publications. It's been around for quite a while. And
Variously about 80 or so publications in which mostly in the beginning when I was in New York City, my research and my publications had to do with drug addiction and alcoholism, where I had various grants and published various articles. I've been involved with child abuse publications, and more recently with bioterrorism and current the advances in forensic science.
Just the world we're in
Okay.
now, currently.
Have you ever published anything in like the New England Journal of Medicine?
Well, I think that just last year I was asked to do a review of a new encyclopedia forensic of legal medicine, and I wrote up a book review that was published there.
Okay. Have you ever published anything in the area of accidental deaths, suicidal deaths, homicide deaths, things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. In addition to your academic or your education that we've talked about and your experience in these review boards and so forth, do you ever give lectures to groups or organizations in the United States or outside the United States?
Yes.
Okay, what kind of,
I
let's
travel
say,
the world,
what type
Daddy.
of groups do you ever lecture
I get
to
on
or
a
give
private jet.
talks to?
Mostly
They said Dr. Biden all over the
homicide seminars in which police agencies are involved in New York and around the country and around the world. I've been to lecture to homicide groups in China and throughout South America, Israel. They all have the same kind of tools as we have in the United States to do their job. I lecture to attorneys, defense attorneys, to prosecuting attorneys, to judges. Just a couple of weeks ago to the annual Arizona Judicial Conference. A few months before that to the Louisiana Judicial Conference, in which judges are anxious to learn about forensic sciences and the new things that are happening in forensic science.
Okay.
And to medical students and law students.
Okay. Now, Dr. Rodden, when you do these speaking engagements, do you typically charge for your services, or do you do that some other way?
Usually not. Occasionally, but usually not.
Okay. You do that pro bono?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, have you ever heard of a organization known as the California District Attorneys Investigation Association, or Investigators Association?
The California District Attorneys Investigators Association, yes.
Okay. How are you familiar with that organization?
Well, I became familiar because I was asked to be a keynote speaker in their coming annual conference in September down in San Francisco.
Okay. Somebody from that organization contacted you to do this, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that something you're going to charge for? Or?
No, that's pro bono.
Okay. Have you ever given presentations on issues regarding cause and manner of death?
I didn't hear you.
Have you ever given talks to lawyers, prosecutors, judges on cause and manner of death and how that work is done?
Surely, yes.
Okay. Can you tell the members of the jury, generally as a person who was a medical examiner, ran a medical examiner's office, what do you do? You know, what is the role of the medical examiner in determining cause and manner of death?
The role of the medical examiner varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, much depending on the local laws and local custom. In my view, the role of the medical examiner is to start right off at the scene of death, evaluate the scene of death, do autopsies as necessary, provide whatever opinions to both sides, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, as requested, and to accurately determine not just the cause of death, because especially in homicides, the police 99% of the time, not 95% of the time, when we call in a homicide, they know what the cause of death is. I mean, they don't say, "Doc, we have a dead body." They say, "Doc, we have a shooting, or we have a stabbing, we have an axe murder," and they're usually very accurate. Our job is not just to confirm the obvious, but to find anything else out that could be helpful in the investigation and in learning something to prevent these kind of incidents in the future, such as toxicology with any drugs on board. Are there new drugs coming into the area that the authorities should know about? And are there new bacterial infections coming into the area? Things like that. So there are also natural death concerns as well as traumatic death concerns.
I want to now ask you about the work you do in your private capacity, Dr. Bodden. You mentioned that you're half-time with the New York State Police, and you, since the mid-1980s, you've had a business in private
We know that this is the G of
Okay,
G's.
and what type of clients do you have? If you could sort of give me a general...
Literally an entire video of just him saying why he's the man. I mean, I get it. It's awesome. It's impressive, but 46 minutes?
overview of the type of people that call you and ask you to assist with them.
Well, in my capacity as a physician, as a private physician, I'm involved with criminal cases that don't conflict with the New York State Police. That is, with civil cases, with investigation of cold cases, a lot of cold cases now where new information is available because of DNA and all that, such as Medgar Evers' case, where exhuming the body and looking for new technological materials could lead to an answer that wasn't available 20 or 30 years ago. So that, and I do a lot of work with Innocence Project, the pro bono kind of work with people who can't afford physicians. That's where the pro bono stuff comes in, you know. And
pro bono is a legal term for you don't get paid. Is that
that's
right?
right.
Okay.
That's right. But that there's a good reason for it, not just that there's good reason that they really need forensic pathology services, but can't afford it, and there's nowhere else they can turn, is the unfortunate thing.
Okay. So the type of work you do in the private capacity where you do get paid, do you ever work for governmental jurisdictions, states, cities, counties?
Oh, yes. I've done a lot of work in various states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, for the prosecutors and defense attorneys. In California, I've done a lot of work over the years in Los Angeles.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. How about
everyone just get in there.
Let's say the District Attorney's Office of Los Angeles County that employs these two fine gentlemen here. Have you ever worked for them as a forensic pathologist?
Well, for their colleagues, yes.
Okay. And what type of work would you do for the District Attorney's Office, either their office or some other District Attorney's office?
Usually it would have to do with criminal cases. My first involvement was back around 1981 or so, when I was asked to get involved with the death of John Belushi, because I had done a lot of work in drug addiction and heroin and cocaine deaths in New York City, and there was an issue with the death of John Belushi, whether it was caused by somebody else injecting heroin or cocaine into him. And I was called there. I testified, I think, at the grand jury or preliminary hearing. I gave information for the suspect in Canada to be extradited back to California, and I was present in some grand jury testimonies. And after that, I was called a number of times in cases by the District Attorney's Office. In fact, around that time, there was the death of a black football player, Ron Settles, and I initially was called by Johnny Cochran. And that's where I met Roger Rosen in his office at that time, when he was a young fellow. And then, as the investigation, there was an issue as to whether
they get the kick out of an age joke in this courtroom.
He committed suicide in the Signal Hill jail, or whether a police officer had hanged him, had caused his death and then hanged him to make it look like suicide. And I was asked initially by Johnny Cochran to do an exhumation to see if we can distinguish those. And I was later taken over by the district attorney, who was Gil Garcetti at that time, the assistant district attorney who was investigating that case, and I testified in that case.
Okay. So you mentioned two cases, the Settles case and the Belushi case, but somebody was prosecuted. Have you ever testified or been utilized by the district attorney's office in any other cases other than that?
Yeah, one interesting case was the Dr. Boggs case. He's a psychiatrist, and there was an issue raised by actually the homicide detective John Perkins in Glendale, who thought there was a death of a person who had been signed out and cremated by the medical examiner's office as a heart attack that was really an insurance scam, and that this doctor had caused his death to collect the insurance. And in the course of the investigation, I was here on another case as a defense witness in the O.J. Simpson case in this building.
You called that CH. As soon as you said it, he said
O.J.
O.J.
to
Simpson.
testify as defense witness in the O.J. Simpson case, I was called in and testified as district attorney's witness in the Boggs case. And there were three people involved. Oprah Winfrey was involved, and they were convicted. Mr.
Wow,
McKenzie, Al
CH.
McKenzie, were a colleague of these gentlemen.
Oprah.
Okay.
Enters the
So
chat.
when you work for the district attorney's office or you work for a defense attorney for that matter, do you ever charge for your services?
Yes, if they can afford it, then I will charge for it. And in this instance, I charged.
You charge the district attorney's office when you were working for them, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you if you work for a defense attorney, do you basically charge a higher rate, lower rate, or the same rate?
Similar.
Okay. And you've charged for your services in this particular case, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And when did you first become involved in this case?
In this case, I was called by the initial attorney, Robert Shapiro, on the day of the death of Lana Clark. I was called in the afternoon,
Okay.
February 3rd, and asked to come and attend the autopsy. And I then called Dr. Lakshmanan and advised him that I'd been called.
This is irrelevant. Any conversation between him and Dr. Lakshmanan at this point?
Sustained.
Yeah, we'll get into that. You were contacted by
Robert Shapiro.
right, and basically asked in your private capacity to work with him involving the death of Lana Clarkson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was back on the day of her death.
The day of her death, yes.
February 3rd of 2003. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've been working on this case since that time. Is that correct? Up until now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you
worked on Epstein?
do you charge for your services?
Yes.
For all the work that you've done in the case?
Yes.
About how much since 2003, how many days have you worked in the case, and what's your daily average working rate or whatever?
Last I checked, my fees have been about up to over $80,000 over the 4 years, involving a few. I can calculate it. It involves, hold on a second, about 30 or 40 days that I work.
Okay, so if you calculate that per day, would it be $3,000, $4,000 a day, something around there?
Yes, when I calculate, that's the way it works out.
I'll take
yeah.
that.
Okay. Now, when you work for, let's say, do you ever work for the city of Los Angeles?
I've been called just
Wow,
last
my
week
God.
about
I
working
didn't
for the
know
city
that
of
part.
Los Angeles, but there will be a fee for that, yeah.
Okay, and you've worked for other prosecutorial offices and been involved in prosecutions involving homicide cases, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you charge them the same rate? In other words, the same $3,000 to $4,000 a day that you do in this case?
Yeah, although this case, if it's only a short period of time, the rate might be higher than if it's long drawn out. My rates have gone up in the past 4 years also,
Okay,
but
no,
not to the present client.
Okay, so your rates have gone up, like let's say when you were involved in the Boggs case a number of years ago, your rates have gone up
Since then, but it was around, it was less than $3,000 a day in those days.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned that you've been involved in a number of cases
God
here
almighty.
locally.
This guy's
In your
Jesus.
career, Dr. Bodden, how many times have you been involved in doing autopsies where you basically, well, let me ask you this. Is there a difference between doing an autopsy and investigating a death? In other words, is that the same thing, or is there something that might be different in that?
No, it's different because an autopsy is primarily a mechanical procedure to evaluate the outside of the body for any injuries and the inside of the body for injuries. An investigation requires using whatever is gained from the autopsy with other information to be able to arrive for a medical examiner. Three things we're obligated to do on the death certificate: determine the identity of the person, determine the cause of death, determine the manner of death. And we, by law, are responsible to make those decisions.
Okay. In the United States, do medical examiners, or do they determine these things? Is that what their job is?
Medical examiners or coroners have that obligation. Physicians, regular physicians, can issue death certificates on natural death.
wow.
But if it's an unnatural death, it has to be
All celebrities
investigated,
that die
the cause of death
suspiciously or in
determined,
any kind of weird
the death
capacity
certificate
get
signed by
this
a
guy.
coroner or a medical
That's
examiner in those cases.
Why don't you define for the members of the jury what an unnatural death is? What does that entail, the scope of that?
Well, in general, natural death is a death caused by natural diseases. Cancer, heart disease, kidney disease, Alzheimer's disease would be considered natural deaths. Unnatural deaths tend to be traumatic, some kind of injury, shooting, stabbing, hanging, automobile accident would all be part of unnatural deaths. Drug abuse, drugs that cause harm to the body would fall within the coroner or medical examiner's jurisdiction.
Now, when you were with the City of New York and thereafter, up until this time, you still do autopsies, is that correct?
Yeah, I do, but much less than I used to do.
Okay. Over your career, since you started, how many autopsies have you been involved in?
Well, I personally performed over 20,000 medical legal autopsies. I've been involved with many times that number of autopsies done by other people that may have been under my
Over
supervision.
20,000 autopsies.
Okay, in other words, where you're the supervisor, but somebody else is actually
Yes,
doing the
work.
autopsy.
Yes.
We've arrived at 4 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and take our recess. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. We'll see you at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Next day, he's got to come back for part 2. Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it. If you haven't hit the old like ski yet, put your fingerprint on that thing. Got another
follow up
hour
on
with Dr.
some of the areas that
Bodden.
we were talking about yesterday regarding your background. I want to begin, I think we talked about you personally doing about 20,000 autopsies in your career. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in New York, when you were with the medical examiner's office there, was it routine for you to go to scenes in addition to doing autopsies at some of those cases?
Yes.
And so could you give the members of the jury an idea about how many scenes that you would go to, you have gone to?
In the course of the 20 years I was in New York City, well more than 1,000 or 2,000 scenes of death that I would have gone to.
Okay. And what would you do at scenes? What was your reason for going there?
The reason for going there is, one, to help determine the time of death. The only time one can give an estimate of how long somebody's been dead
Is
by looking at the body at the scene before it's moved. The stiffening of the body, the settling of blood, the temperature change is only valuable where the body is as to how long the person's been dead. It's also important to evaluate the premises to see if there's any evidence of alcohol or drugs,
still kicking.
any evidence of a struggle,
What a life.
any evidence of insulin or digitalis in the refrigerator. The person may be ill, because most of the scenes that I'd go to would be non-homicidal, not homicidal scenes. And then to see what kinds of abnormalities there are that will permit a better, more intelligent autopsy. Are there issues of extremity injuries, or how the extremities are, so that the extremities should be examined when they usually aren't in
I wonder how him and
routine
Linda
autopsy.
met.
In homicide cases, it's important to know, are there any bullets at the scene? Did any bullets go in and out of the body? To be able to look to see whether there are bullets there and how many bullets we expect to get from the autopsy. When there's blood at the scene from stabbings or gunshot wounds, to be able to determine if there was a struggle, if the person moved after death. Also, to be able to interview whoever's at the scene that might have seen or heard something, the neighbor above, the next door neighbors, the persons that often the police don't get to talk to. We look more for the medical information. When was the last time the neighbor saw the individual? When was the last time the person picked up the milk or the mail or things? So there are a lot of things at the scene that help us determine how to do a better autopsy.
Yeah, Dr. Bond, have you ever gone to scenes where there's situations where somebody took their own life?
Surely, yes.
Did they include self-inflicted gun wounds?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever seen blood spatter, blood flow from those types of situations?
Yes.
Is that something that is unfamiliar to you?
No, that's something we would, the medical examiner would look at, would examine, and incorporate whatever can be helpful to the forensic pathologist, realizing that the blood spatter experts, for example, would have much more knowledge than we do in the spatter patterns, but certainly the blood at the scene would help us determine if there was a struggle or if the person walked around after the injury, for example.
Okay. You've seen situations where somebody shoots themselves, let's say in the head or in the mouth, and there's blood spatter in the area?
Yes, certainly.
I want to talk about a few more areas of your background, your expertise, Dr. Bond. And one area I wanted to talk about is whether or not you've ever qualified as an expert in other states or jurisdictions in the United States.
Yes, I have in most jurisdictions in the United States over the years.
Have you testified in foreign countries also?
Yes.
Dr. Bodden, you mentioned that you had come to L.A. On other cases, other circumstances. Did you ever do autopsies here in Los Angeles in your career?
Yes. I did an autopsy at the medical. I've done autopsies in Los Angeles in funeral homes. For example, when I did a second autopsy in a number of cases. However, there was one time when I did do a second autopsy at the medical examiner's office.
Here in Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles.
Okay, what was that? A gunshot case?
Yeah, it was a gunshot. In fact, a gunshot case involving the neck area, involving Christian Brandau, who was shot Christian Brandau shot Dag Drolet in Marlon Brando's home. And I got a call about a week later because the bullet had not been found, and was able to go down to the medical examiner's office and do a second autopsy in the medical examiner's office. Did not find the bullet. The bullet was not there. Went back to the scene, to the home, and was able to find the bullet at the home.
Okay.
That had been overlooked.
Okay, so you were retained in your private capacity, is that correct?
Yeah, I was called, received a call from a voice that I recognized, Marlon Brandau, and he was just concerned that they hadn't found the bullet.
Okay, so what did you do with the bullet once you found
So
it?
when we found the bullet, this is about a week later, there was a concern that there was expression that, is this good or bad for the defendant? And I immediately called the homicide squad. I called, I think, John Perkins, the homicide detective in Glendale, because I had been involved with cases with him, to say the first thing we have to do is turn this bullet over to the right authority. And the appropriate sergeant came to get the bullet.
Okay.
Even though there was some question about that when I first found it.
Okay, so you turned that over to the law enforcement?
To the Los Angeles Police Department.
Even though you were working privately for essentially the family, the defendant in that case?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, were you all later involved in that case in any way, or?
Yeah, I did testify there was a plea bargain. I testified at the sentencing hearing.
Okay. And was it regarding your autopsy and your finding the bullet and so forth?
Regarding the autopsy and also regarding the presence of gunshot residues on the hand of the decedent. The issue was, did Christian Brando shoot Dag Drolet while he was asleep lying on the couch where he was found?
Relaxing now with all this loot.
Or as Christian Brando said, that he had held a gun on the fellow to threaten him not to hit his sister or something, and the gun went off when Dag Drolet struck the hand to try and move it.
Okay.
And I find often that police will assume that the person was shot in the position found, when often there's movements afterwards. In my opinion, from the trajectory, was clear that the story that Christian Brando told was consistent, that he was seated, bullet went through into the rug that was missed, and then he fell down in the position he was found.
Okay, I don't want to get into all those details, but you mentioned that you were, hold on for a second.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you were, you got a hold of this Detective Perkins from
John Perkins, yes.
And then he led you to the Los Angeles detectives assigned to that case?
The appropriate person to come over to get to retrieve the bullet.
Okay.
So there was a chain of evidence.
Were you involved with Mr. Perkins in other cases besides the Bog case? Any poisoning cases or anything like that?
Yeah, I was involved with a number of cases from Glendale, including Efren Salvador, the respiratory therapist who admitted to...
I'm going to object at this point, Your Honor. The details of the other cases are not...
I want to see counsel at the bench, please.
Are we going to get any? We've had Lana mentioned once.
Dr. Bodden, I
So
don't
far
want to get
today.
into the details of that case with this respiratory therapist, but
Right.
he was being prosecuted by the district attorney's office, and you were involved in that? And we'll leave it at that? Okay. Dr. Bodden, have you published any books in the area of pathology? Have you had occasion to do that?
I published or edited 2 or 3 books in forensic pathology, having to do with forensic pathology, but and 2 for public consumption. That I've written 2 books about nonfiction books about how forensic science helps solve cases.
Okay, what are the names of those?
Well, Unnatural Death and Dead Reckoning.
Okay, these would be for what type of readership?
For the general public.
Okay. Are you involved in any other type of, in addition to your work with the New York State Police and your private practice, do you do anything else to in the area of forensic pathology that's not related to those two things?
Well, what happened with the unnatural death that was published back in 1988, that has been made into a series on HBO called Autopsy.
Okay.
And that to demonstrate to the public how forensic science works. And there were then spin-offs there to Crossing Jordan and to Fox News, Fox National News, where I'm the forensic contributor to Fox News.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Bond, now I want to start to focus in on your work here in this particular case. And if I recall your testimony yesterday, you were called by Mr. Shapiro to do what?
I was called by Mr. Shapiro to attend the autopsy and to advise him of what the findings were.
Okay. And how did you get to the place where the autopsy was being conducted? What led you to do that? In other words, what were the facts that got you to L.A.?
Well, after I was called by Mr. Shapiro on February 3rd, I then called the coroner medical examiner's office here, spoke with personnel at the medical examiner's office, I think including Dr. Lakshmanan, who arranged to hold the autopsy the next day till about 11 o'clock, giving me a chance to fly in the morning. So I came in the morning, was fitted with a mask that's required in the medical examiner's office for health reasons, and then attended the autopsy conducted by Dr. Pena.
Okay, so did you know Dr. Lakshmanan before this?
Yes, I've known Dr. Lakshmanan for many years.
How's that? What was your contact with him?
When I was a deputy medical examiner in Manhattan, Dr. Lakshmanan was a resident
and a doctor,
pathologist, I believe a Columbia Presbyterian, and he would come down and moonlight, as I had done previously, and do autopsies in the medical examiner's office on holidays and weekends, and I would supervise him. So we met at that time.
Okay.
In I think it was the early 70s.
Okay. Now you've attended and observed autopsies. What's the reason for you just watching or not being the person doing the autopsy?
Well, usually when I'm asked by an attorney to attend an autopsy, it's the attorney wants to know if it was done properly, if anything was missed or anything was neglected, and number two, to advise him or her right away of the findings, because normally in an autopsy, the attorney doesn't get the findings till the autopsy is completed, which usually takes months, in this case 7 or 8 months. And by advising him of my interpretation of the findings, the attorney has a better means of deciding what he or she should do, whether they should plea bargain, whether they should get other experts, et cetera.
All right, so you came to California, and this would be the following day after Atlanta Clarkson's death?
That's correct.
Okay, and you went to the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's office, and you were there when the autopsy began, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you observe and participate in that procedure?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury essentially what that was, what you did?
Well, I was present with Dr. Pena, and I did a little bit of dissection of the heart and some other things that weren't relevant to the main cause of death, and that Dr. Pena did a very fine autopsy, and at some point he was able to establish there was no gunshot residues on the face, for example, and on opening the mouth there was evidence of a gunshot wound of the mouth. And on looking into the mouth, I found that there was a lot of gunshot residue and debris that indicated clearly that the weapon was inside of the mouth at the time, the muzzle at the time of discharge. And that was an important issue, because at the scene the evening before, when Mr. Spector was arrested, he was arrested because it was felt to be a homicide. And there are certain findings at autopsy that would establish that it's a homicide, which weren't present, and there are certain findings at autopsies that would suggest that it might not be a homicide. Okay. And that's why I was there one of the aspects I was looking at.
Okay, so what was the the nature of the wound in the mouth, was that one of the principal issues in the autopsy? Is that a fair
Yes,
statement?
that was the principal issue initially. Was the cause of death, was it clearly a homicide, because that would determine what the defense lawyer would do, or was it not clearly a homicide?
Okay. Well, let's not worry about what the lawyers are going to do. I want to focus on what you did at the autopsy, what you
Yes.
observed, Dr. Bodden. And when you looked in the mouth, tell the jurors how you did that and came to the conclusion that the gun was in the mouth, and in the mouth at the time it went off. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What did you see that told you that? If you could put that in kind of layman's terms and tell the jurors.
Yes, that there, on opening the mouth, and Dr. Pena had a flashlight to be able to look into the mouth, there was what I interpreted as gunshot residues, none of which were on the face. All of it was inside the mouth, that the upper teeth that had dental replacements had been were not present. The dental prostheses weren't present, and none of it was inside the mouth. If the bullet had come from outside, there should have been some of that material inside the mouth, which it wasn't. So that was the important part of it. So my opinion was that it was not a distant wound, it was a intraoral wound.
Okay, and what was the significance of it to you that it was an intraoral wound or inside the mouth wound?
Intraoral wound meant that it could be the decedent discharging it, or it could be somebody else discharging it. However, intraoral
Be right back,
wounds
guys.
are almost
Keep my Hot Pockets
always self-inflicted.
Still listening.
Okay.
So that immediately that became a concern, that this could have been a self-inflicted wound. And there was some damage that had been done to the right thumb.
Objection, this is no response.
Just the problem is it's becoming narrative.
Okay. We'll get to the thumb in a moment, Dr. Bodden. So if it wasn't an intraoral wound, if it was from a distance, does that change the way that a pathologist like you would view the manner of the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Okay, how would that be? In other words, if it were shot from, let's say, 5 feet away, what would be the...
If the evidence was that the discharge was 5 feet away, that means 99% of the time it has to be a homicide.
Okay, simply because of the mechanics. Why would it be 100% if it was 5 feet away?
Well, occasionally people build devices and they can pull a string and set off a bullet. And
Not quite. Almost
the
ready.
distance is important because we can tell at autopsy whether there are gunshot residues on the victim up till about 18
OEB,
inches, 24
morning.
inches away.
Welcome in here.
So if there's no gunshot residues on the body or on the hands of the decedent, then it means that the decedent didn't discharge the weapon. Somebody else it must have been discharged a different way, and it would be looked upon immediately as a homicide.
Okay. There's been some talk in this case about, a intraoral or inside the mouth wound being typically a self-inflicted wound. Are there other types of deaths that are typically considered homicides, in other words, because of the nature of those wounds?
Yes, and the main one, as I just mentioned, is if there's no gunshot residues on the victim, on the decedent, that in itself is 99% homicide.
Okay, how about
if there are multiple gunshot wounds in the back, it's 99% homicide.
Okay, so depending upon the physical findings, you'd be focused on a particular notion as to how it might have happened.
Yes, there are patterns of injury, and there's certain patterns that are homicidal and there's certain patterns that are suicidal.
Okay. Now, Dr. Bodden, the finding of these residues, and was there soot inside the mouth also?
Yes.
Okay, and then the autopsy continues, and eventually the body is dissected and parts of the body are looked at. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's the normal autopsy procedure?
Yes.
And does that ever involve looking at the lungs at all?
Oh, As part of the autopsy, there is a thorough examination of the outside of the body, and then a thorough examination of the inside of the body, including all the organs, including the lungs.
Okay, and let's start with the outside in, I guess that's the way it proceeds, that basically, were there any injuries to the outside of the body that were significant in this case?
I was late this morning.
The only
About an hour and
significant
15
injuries from the
minutes.
outside was
I was up late.
looked like a bruising on the left, as I recall,
Okay,
the
wake
angle of
up.
the left mouth, which looked like a stretch kind of hemorrhage, small, and an injury to the right, the thumbnail.
Okay. Could you see any other, let's say, bruises, black eyes, anything such as that?
There was a black eye, a small black eye on the left, which was caused by blood flowing around the eye and underneath the skin.
Okay. Was there anything significant about any of the external findings, that black eye or these other stretch mark injuries or anything like that, that might have told you whether she was involved in a struggle before she died or anything such as that?
Yeah, I saw no evidence of a struggle, no evidence of scratches, and no evidence of bruising that would indicate a struggle. She had some minor, tiny marks on one of the forearms that Dr. Pena did take microscopic slides, and I think they're very nonspecific and do not indicate a struggle.
What do you mean nonspecific? What's that mean to a doctor?
Nonspecific, they could happen many different ways. There wasn't a specific cause. It was just banging against a edge of a table or banging against a door going in or out can cause small contusions, and could cause small contusions.
Okay. On the external examination, I had asked you about the lungs and so forth. Did you observe anything that was of significance with regard to the lungs once the external examination began?
On the external examination, there were two notable things. Externally, there are two different externals. The autopsy is first an external examination, which is just the skin and body surfaces, and then we make an incision and look at the internal organs externally with the naked eye, so that on examining the lungs with the naked eye, not under the microscope yet, but with the naked eye, there were two interesting observations. One was that there was a blotchy hemorrhage. I think Dr. Pena described as geographic blotchy hemorrhage that one could see on the surfaces of the lungs, which often indicates inhalation of blood.
Okay, and you say that Dr. Pena, he described that in his autopsy report?
Yes.
Did you see that yourself?
Yes.
Okay, and had you ever seen things like that before?
Oh, yes. It's commonly seen if somebody inhales blood.
Okay, and what did you look at the lungs in any further depth after that?
Yes. As happens at all autopsies, the organs are weighed because the weight of the organs tells a lot about the health of the organs.
Okay, how does that occur?
Well,
How much does my organs weigh? How healthy am I?
The heart
Let me go check on
usually
the South
weighs
Pocket.
300 grams or so. If it's over 400 grams, it means there's some disease process, probably.
Okay.
With the lungs usually weigh together about 600 grams.
Both lungs?
Both lungs together. There are 454 grams in a pound. So 600 grams weighs a little bit more than a pound. The lungs of Miss Clarkson weighed over 1,800 grams.
Okay.
So they were like 3 times normal weight.
Let me ask you some questions about that. The autopsy, and I know this is unpleasant to talk about, but Dr. Pena was doing the routine taking of the lungs and weighing it, and that's something that's done in properly conducted autopsies. Is that correct?
In every autopsy, yes.
Right. So he weighs it, and then he documents that in his records and eventually reports that. Is that true?
Yes.
Not a sponsor.
He weighs each organ, makes a note of the weight, and when he dictates
Air fired up.
and completes his autopsy protocol.
Some have had Hot Pockets in a while.
He includes those weights in the protocol.
Okay,
bought 'em
so
at
the
the last
lungs
shopping
were
trip,
3
and
times
I
their
ain't had 'em for
normal
years.
weight.
They're all right.
What was the import or
Quick
significance
little
of that, if any,
snack.
according to
Well-
your understanding?
Yeah, the importance to me is that while she's alive, it's about 600 grams. 1,800 grams means that while she's dying, about 1,200 grams of fluid, edema fluid and blood, go into her lungs.
Okay.
Because the extra 1,200 grams is blood and fluid. That's called pulmonary edema. So that had to have happened after she was shot and before the heart stopped beating, and that would take a few minutes to develop.
Okay. Why couldn't that happen after her heart stopped and just by sitting in the chair, gravity or something like that?
No, blood, fluids, water doesn't enter the lungs after we die. After the heart stops, it enters the lungs because as the heart beats, fluid goes to the lungs and comes out of the blood vessels and into the air sacs. And that's over a quarter, 1,200 cc is over a quart of fluid.
Okay.
And that's a lot of fluid to develop.
Let me back up and ask you some questions as to the cause of death. Was it determined as to exactly what the path of the bullet took at the autopsy that you observed?
Yes.
What was that, if you could explain that to the jury?
The path of the bullet was a discharge in the oral cavity, about the middle of the tongue or so, and it continued, as Dr. Pena described in the autopsy report, straight from front to back and slightly upward.
Okay.
And it went through the upper portion of the spinal cord and the back of the brain, and caused multiple fractures of the vertebra, the spine bone, and the bottom of the skull right next to the...
Yeah, I don't know exactly what he's saying, Shelley, but yeah, he's definitely leaning or trying to make the jury believe that she did this to herself.
spinal cord.
Okay, so when Dr. Pena was doing the autopsy, you observed the path of the bullet and the place where he tracked the bullet and that observation?
Yes.
Okay, do you have any disagreement with his description of that?
No.
Okay, and was there an exit wound?
No, the bullet stopped beneath the skin.
I honestly need to go back to Dr. Pena's testimony now to remember what he said. It's been so long.
In the back, and Dr. Pena recovered it.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, when there's an inside the mouth or intra-oral gunshot wound, and there's no exit wound, does anything come out of the mouth in those situations based upon your experience?
Yes.
What happens in those
situations? What happens if the gases that come out of the muzzle of the gun...
Foundation.
I am satisfied based on his prior testimony and background. He can offer an opinion and you can cross-examine on it. The objection is overruled.
Go ahead.
Yeah. A bullet is discharged going 900 feet per second or so by tremendous explosion in the weapon that forces the bullet out. The gases created force the bullet out at a great rate of speed. When those gases get into the oral cavity, well, if the gun is away from the skin, the gases dissipate in the air. But if the gases are confined in the oral cavity, they either have to come out the exit wound, which didn't happen here, or go into the cranial cavity and cause an explosion of the skull, which happens sometimes, or come back out through the mouth and nose from the opposite direction the bullet was coming.
Okay, when these gases come out, do they come out just by themselves or with other material?
No, the gases will come out with gunshot residues that are in the gases, the burnt, unburned powder granules, the soot that comes out, some of it will stay in the oral cavity, some will come out with the gases that are coming out. Tissue and blood, saliva, mucus that's present in the mouth will also be blown out, so that there'll be a lot of things coming out from the oral cavity through the mouth, through the nose, in a situation like this where it can't go out any other way.
Okay. And in trying to determine what happened and whether this was a self-inflicted wound or something other, do you ever take into consideration how that occurs and the dynamics of that in determining, what your ultimate opinion would be on a case?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you do that, Dr. Bond?
Well, because normally in self-inflicted wounds,
That hot pocket hit the spot,
there
Sean.
are, especially of this nature, of oral cavity, there'll be gases, gunshot residues, blood, tissue that'll come out onto the hands of the person who discharges the weapon.
Okay. I'm going to have Exhibit QQ pulled up, Defendant's Exhibit QQ, and ask you a few questions about that, Dr. Bond. You see this photograph of a gun firing, Exhibit QQ?
Yes.
Now, do you recognize what type of do you know the difference between a revolver and an automatic?
Yes.
Okay, and the material that's coming out of this gun, is that the material that you're talking about, the gases and so forth, like that I'm highlighting here and circling?
May I use this?
Yeah.
There are some flame coming out of the muzzle, and gases here, and I'm not sure what this is. This could be gases or flame, but it looks like gas, dense gases, and soot. And there are burnt and unburned powder granules. There's also gases coming out of the chamber gap.
What are you getting,
here.
Bogey?
Cylinder gap?
What you gonna
Cylinder gap,
fix?
yes.
Okay, and if the gun is fired
breakfast.
inside the mouth, does this event, this discharge of these gases as illustrated on Exhibit QQ, does that happen inside the mouth?
Yes.
Okay, and setting aside whatever damage the bullet may cause itself, does this discharge of these gases, does it cause any additional damage or injury to the body?
The gases themselves can cause rupture of small capillaries, depending how rapidly they expand. And certainly the burnt and unburnt powder granules themselves, and sometimes little fragments from the bullet, depending on how the chamber is, how well made the gun is, will embed themselves or strike surrounding pieces, surrounding tissues, and cause little punctate hemorrhages.
Okay, and did you see this type of injury inside Lana Clarkson's mouth with the little soot, burn particles made these little marks and so forth?
Yes,
Okay.
that on the skin would be called tattooing if it's from a distance.
Okay, now if the gun was discharged even close to the mouth or close to the lips but not in the mouth, would you see any of these little burns on the outside of the lips and things like that?
Yes, burns on the outside, and of course the teeth would be discharged into the mouth rather than out from the mouth.
Okay, but let's say the mouth was open, and did you see anything that suggested that the gun was anywhere near the outside of the mouth when it was discharged?
No.
Okay, and so these little particles can burn and cause little burns, I take it, inside the mouth, along with leaving all these particles there. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, does this explosion of the bullet, in addition to the bullet path itself, does it cause any blunt force trauma to the inside of the mouth?
Well, the gases can cause the tongue to go back in the mouth and to strike other parts of the body. The gases can cause fractures. The bones of the face and the hard palate that we can feel with the top of our tongue are rather thin, and these gases can cause fractures to various bony structures and cause damage and injury to the soft tissues of the tongue, cause bruising on the tongue.
Okay. Now, in your experience, Dr. Bodden, had you ever seen inside the mouth gunshot wounds where bruises to the tongue have occurred?
Sure, yes.
Is that something that was that's unusual?
No.
Is it something that's common?
Yes, because of the forces of the gases.
Okay. And in this particular case, when you were at the autopsy, did you see any injury or damage done to the tongue area of Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
Okay, what did you see?
There were some fresh subcutaneous hemorrhages, bruises, primarily the back of the tongue, and there were some areas where the tongue had been pushed up against the back teeth of the upper jaw.
Okay. Did you see anything that looked like teeth marks on the tongue?
Yeah, I think there were teeth imprints on the back from the molars, the upper molars, where the tongue struck that because of the gases, and there was a tear also of the top of the tongue.
Okay. And what were these caused by? Was it these bruises, these tears?
I think that by the gases that had caused the tongue to go backwards and upwards, and the impact of the tongue against those rigid places caused some of the bruising. Other bruising was caused by just the force of the gases.
Okay. Is that something that you've seen before?
Yes.
That type of bruising and so forth? What type of circumstances in your experience have you seen that occurring?
Well, my experience over the years, I've seen a few dozen intraoral gunshot wounds and handled more than that. I saw one homicidal, the rest were self-inflicted.
Okay. And did these types of injuries, these bruises, did they appear in those cases also?
Yes, because of the tremendous amount of force that goes into the mouth. And I've seen, in addition to those shotguns, rifles in the mouth, where the additional force really causes extensive damage to the skull and fractures of the skull, and because there's more gases than in a handgun.
Okay. I'm going to put up Exhibit RR now, which is in here. Dr. Bodden, I want you to assume for the purposes of this question that this is a picture of the weapon that was that caused the death of Lana Clarkson. Are you familiar with this type of weapon?
Yes.
Have you actually seen pictures of this particular weapon before?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you sort of a hypothetical question. Would it be possible if somebody wanted to harm somebody, if they took this particular weapon with this 2-inch barrel and to shove it in somebody's mouth and cause a bruise to a human tongue? Is that something that would be capable of somebody would be capable of doing had they intended to do that?
Well, when you ask me a question, is it possible? In medicine, anything is possible, but I've never seen it, and I think it's highly unlikely that pushing that type of weapon into the mouth would cause a bruising on the tongue, and I haven't seen it with that type of object.
Why would that be unlikely, doctor, in your opinion?
Well, we're better at the findings than at trying to explain the findings. One, it doesn't happen by pushing objects into the mouth. The tongue is mobile. If something pushes against it, it can be pushed out of the way most of the time. It's mostly muscular, as opposed to, there's not the subcutaneous fat that we have on our skin where hemorrhages mostly occur. So whatever the reason, it just doesn't happen.
Okay, and if somebody were to try to do that with a weapon like this, that's described here in Exhibit RR, would you want to look at the outside of the mouth to see if there was any injury that would be consistent with that scenario?
That would be one feature to look for. Is there something that was pushed in that injured the outside of the mouth as well as the tongue? That would be something to look for.
And the teeth, chips in teeth, things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay, and did you see anything that was consistent with somebody forcing a gun inside the mouth on the outside of Miss Clarkson's face that was consistent with that at the autopsy?
No.
Were there any little chips of teeth inside the mouth that would suggest that somebody shoved something in the mouth and may have injured one of those areas and broken off a tooth particle or anything like that?
No.
Okay, is it correct, Dr. Bodden, that the entire inside the mouth, down the throat, etc., at autopsy, there were no tooth particles?
Oh, he's passing out. Oh, there he is. Hey, same wig. Rocking the same wig today as the lower third down there.
Artificial teeth particles in her mouth.
That's correct, yes. There weren't any.
Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture that's kind of graphic, and I apologize for that, but Exhibit D to the 7. I'm going to ask you some questions about that. Now, one of the things that's routinely done is the tongue is excised also by the pathologist, in this case, Dr. Pena. Is that true?
Yes, and he did it very properly.
Okay, and they also take pictures of all these things, these internal organs and things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is this a picture of the tongue that we've been talking about that has been described in the autopsy report that was taken out by Dr. Pena?
Yes.
Do you see the bruising that is referred to by Dr. Pena?
Yes.
Okay, is it on both the left and the right side of the tongue?
May I use...
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, on the tongue. This is the tip of the tongue here at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
There's some laceration of the top of the tongue, which could be partially a graze from the bullet and separation by the expanding gases.
The explosion in the mouth.
Could cause this tearing effect.
Okay.
And there are a number of bruisings on the tongue. In the back, there are multiple little hemorrhages that is seen better in some other photos that you have. And I think the bruising that Dr. Pena was concerned about, as far as I know, was the bruise here at 3 o'clock. But there's a similar bruise here at 9 o'clock. And my interpretation when I looked at this, and with a clearer photograph, is that just as this shows some marks that indicate to me compression against a molar tooth, a little irregularity that a bite could cause, but impact against a tooth, there's similar markings in this bruise, and it's symmetrical. That my opinion is both of these are caused by impacting against the upper molars of the back molars of the jaw.
Okay, so on this one on the right side, as we're looking at it here, there's bruising to the tongue that occurred when? When did that occur?
At the moment, a millisecond after the discharge of the weapon. The weapon discharges, gases go in, raise the tongue, push the tongue in the back, cause bruising, lots of bruising back here as the tongue hits the edge of the hard palate, and here where it impacts against the molar teeth.
Okay, so the bruising occurs when the explosion occurs at the time of discharge, or
Yes.
within milliseconds thereafter. Now, on the left side, you see this, it looks like a little triangle, and those are actually the teeth that make that mark, actually that characteristic mark. Is that correct?
Yes.
And have you seen this type of injury inside the mouth gunshot wounds before in your experience?
Yes, when the teeth are pushed against the tooth. And they're more than just three. When you look at these more carefully, there are a bunch of little pinpoint abrasions that, in my opinion, match up the surface of the molar teeth.
Okay, and in this area here where you see this kind of it looks like just an irregular bunch of lacerations where the tissue is cut, there's a lot of bruising that's associated with that. Is that
Yes.
correct? And then there's bruising here, left, right, also all through the back. Is that true?
Yes.
And you observed that when you were at the autopsy?
Yes.
So when Dr. Pena was doing his dissections and you were there observing and he would take these items out and study them, you would also look at them, is that correct?
Yes, and at the time the tongue was still in the mouth, there was black gunshot residues and particle fragments on the top of the tongue that were removed by swabbing the tongue. The criminals came down, swabbed the tongue, took out the material for evaluation to see whether or not they indeed were gunshot residues. So what we're seeing here is really the cleaned up version of what the tongue looked like.
Okay, and was there any other injury to the inside of the mouth, let's say the cheeks inside or anything such as that?
Yeah, there was a little stretch
Later, Gomez.
mark on
Have a good day,
the
bud.
left, as I recall, the angle of the mouth
It also says homicide instead of homicide.
on the
Homicide.
left.
Okay, and the teeth, you said that there were some missing dental prosthetics or
Yes.
artificial teeth that were missing, is that correct?
Yes.
And at the time of autopsy, did you know where they were, what happened to them?
I didn't, but I had heard that they had found some possible tooth material the day at the death scene.
Okay. All right, if we could take this down, and I want to proceed to another area, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I want to get back to the lungs and so forth. When an autopsy is done, do pathologists usually take tissue specimens of various areas of the body?
I don't think we're going to get
Yes,
any kind of cross today.
There are two parts to the autopsy, what's called the gross autopsy, meaning what can be seen with the naked eye. We look at the body outside and inside with the naked eye. And then there's the microscopic examination. We take tissues and we can magnify the tissue under the microscope, as we did in biology class, 400 times easily to look for findings that can't be seen with the naked eye.
Okay, and when you say findings, what do you mean by that?
Well, to look at all the different organs for any abnormality, any deviation from normal,
Okay.
and then decide if it has any significance.
Okay. I want to talk about the lungs and kind of go on that subject for a while. Did Dr. Pena, to your knowledge, did he take any slides or sections of the lungs for making these, for further study?
Yes, he did.
Okay, and at some point after the autopsy, did you get a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Now, in Dr. Pena's autopsy report, he describes the air sacs of the lungs, and he gives it a medical name, as having blood in them. Is that something that you observed when you looked at the slides?
Yes.
Okay, and what does that mean when you see that phenomenon?
Well, the blood in the lungs meant that at some point it had been inhaled into the lungs. It can only get into those alveoli, as the text, the little grape-like structures at the end of the bronchial tree, by active inhalation. And this is referred to as aspiration, aspiration, aspiration of blood. and that's was present widely in the lungs.
Okay. Widely, would that mean in many different areas or in the air sacs all around the lungs?
In many different areas.
Okay. And can that happen if somebody's just left unattended after they're deceased, and can gravity cause that to occur?
It can happen after somebody's left unattended as long as the person is breathing. It cannot happen from gravity alone.
Okay. Dr. Bodden, when you say inhalation, when there's inhalation of air in, that's when it gets into these air sacs that you talked about?
Yes, as I breathe in now, if there was any blood in my mouth or food particles, I could breathe it in, and we have, when we're alive, a cough reflex to prevent that from going into the lungs. Mm-hmm. The body tries to protect against any foreign material going to the lungs, and we have the epiglottis that protects the air passages, and a cough reflex if something gets through. Once we're unconscious, the breathing can more easily suck fluid from the mouth into the lungs.
Okay. Now, was there any injury to the lungs, like let's say some type of trauma to the lungs that caused the blood to come from inside the lungs or anything like that?
That can happen sometimes. It didn't happen here. There was no trauma to the lungs, no injury that could have caused bleeding into the lungs. That, in my opinion, all of the blood in the lungs came from breathing it in.
And how did you examine the lungs, and what do you do to make that determination? Do you examine the lung tissue?
Yeah, look at the lung tissue first with the naked eye, mm-hmm. and as I said, these geographic bloody patches suggest that. And then the best test is looking at it under the microscope, and under the microscope one can see actual red blood cells filling up the little the alveolar sacs, and by filling up the alveolar sacs, then air can't get in, the person can't breathe.
Okay. Now, where did the blood come from that ended up in these sacs all the way into the lungs through all the tubes and into these sacs?
The only place it could have come from is from bleeding points in the mouth, in the oral cavity.
Okay.
That is, the bullet, among its destructions that it did, also destroyed little blood vessels, capillaries, and little arteries, arterioles. And these kept bleeding as long as the heart kept beating. And the heart beats after we lose consciousness. Okay,
so in this particular case, is there some suggestion that the heart kept going for a while, even though Ms. Clarkson suffered this traumatic injury?
Yes, I think the traumatic injury to the brain and spinal cord would have caused her to lose consciousness immediately. But the heart has its own intrinsic mechanism of...
To see his eyes, like...
beating. Vice President Cheney just had a pacemaker put in because sometimes the mechanism, the signals that our hearts, the conduction system in our heart doesn't work. So we have to put a pacemaker in. The conduction system we have in our heart will continue to set off signals and beat for many minutes after we're brain dead, after the brain no longer is sending signals to the heart.
Okay, and the path of the bullet in this particular case, if it hit the spine, what effect would that have on a person's ability to breathe or to inhale air, exhale air?
Well, if the bullet, if the trauma completely severs the spine, then there are no signals going to the diaphragms to breathe. The diaphragms are responsible for most of our, about 85% of the breathing is due to the diaphragms going in and out, the bellows that we have internally. When we breathe in, the reason we're breathing in is because our brain is telling the diaphragms to go down and the rib cage to go out, and that sucks in air. And then passively, the diaphragms come up and we exhale, we breathe out. So if the spinal cord is completely severed, there are no more signals going to the diaphragms. We can breathe out. We might be able to take 1 or 2 breaths in, reflexively, but essentially we wouldn't be breathing a lot of material in.
Okay. Now, can you tell whether or not there was any inhalation and what happened in this particular case based upon the physical findings at the autopsy?
Yeah. What was interesting at the autopsy, at the time of the autopsy, there is blood that's been inhaled into the lungs that would have taken a few breaths, a number of breaths. There was pulmonary edema and bloody fluid in the lungs over a quart of fluid that poured into the lungs that would also have taken many minutes. Yet what we see at the autopsy is a complete transection. And the reason that happened, you want to ask me a question or can I continue?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. My opinion as to why that happened is because the spinal cord is very fragile. And the first thing you learn in EMS school or ambulance school is that any kind of neck injury with the spinal cord could be injured, or there's fractures that could injure the spinal cord, the bones around the spine. There must be strict immobilization of the neck. So when a person is hit by a car in the street or is in a fight and is lying in the street, the EMS people immediately put a immobilizer around the neck. The reason for that is during transport, further injuries can occur. The spinal cord is very fragile, and one of the main things in living people is to prevent any further damage to the spinal cord that has already happened by immobilization. Traditionally, with medical examiners and the movement of bodies after death, we don't care about that. It isn't important for life to immobilize the neck. The necks aren't immobilized. And in a situation like this, as the body is moved from the chair into a plastic bag, into the mortuary wagon, it comes out of the mortuary wagon, into the stretcher.
It's narrative, it's not responsive.
Doctor, I think, although we didn't stop you, if go back to the question as to this case, not...
Well, thank you, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I think, in my opinion, in this case, there was incomplete transection of the spinal cord by the bullet, and the rest of the spinal cord was torn during transportation, so that when we saw at the autopsy table, Dr. Pena saw, was a full transection, but it didn't start out that way.
Okay, and what would be the significance of that as it relates to the blood in the lungs?
That after Ms. Clarkson was shot, received a gunshot wound.
They know that, though? Is that just his
through
opinion?
the spine. There was still some nerve fibers that permitted her to continue to breathe, to diaphragms to move for a number of minutes, so that the breathing continued and the aspiration, the inhalation of blood into the lungs continued, and the pouring of fluids into the lung. That more than a quart of blood and fluid that was poured into the lungs during that time continued because there was some activity of the spinal cord.
Okay, and is there any way to know how long this would occur?
Many minutes. Okay. She's unconscious, she's irretrievably injured, but she kept breathing in and the fluids kept pouring in for a few minutes. Okay. 2, 3, 4 minutes.
Now, with reference to the inhalation of blood and so forth, if there's inhalation, is there also exhalation? In other words, does it have to come out some way?
Yeah. When we inhale, it would come out, yes.
Okay. And when people do that, if there's an injury to the area of the mouth and blood, does blood ever get expirated from the mouth?
Surely. Once there's blood in the cranial, in the oral cavity, as we breathe out, some of that blood will come out of the mouth or nose.
Okay. In this particular case, and when you were at the autopsy, did you look at all the other organs of the body? Were they all taken out and examined, et cetera?
Yes, Dr. Pena did totally appropriate autopsy in that regard, yes.
Okay. About how long does an autopsy like this take?
I think the autopsy here took about 4 or 5 hours, as I recall, around that time.
And in addition to doing the work in the that you described, does documentation occur at the time of the autopsy?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the role of documentation? What's the purpose of that?
There are 3 roles for documentation. One role is to identify the findings so that the medical examiner will remember them and be able to relate them at future proceedings. Another is to document findings for other medical examiners or professionals to review the findings and draw his or her own opinions. And the third is so that they can be used as demonstrative evidence in a court procedure such as this.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to look at Exhibit PP. Is it typical to look at the hands of a decedent to see if there's anything on them that might be of interest as far as determining the cause or manner of death?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were at the autopsy, had a nail been removed from Lana Clarkson's right hand?
Yes.
Thumbnail?
Yes.
Okay, and was it your understanding that there was some type of a defect in the nail that led them to do that?
Yes.
Okay, and showing you Exhibit PP, the defect in the nail, would that be the one that's shown in this photograph here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is the right hand of Lana Clarkson, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, the other areas of the hand, the other fingers and so forth, that we could have the overall view, do you typically look at that to see if there's anything that might suggest that that person handled a weapon? In other words, do you physically look at it to try to determine that?
Well, I would, as a pathologist, physically look at it to see if there are any injuries or any abnormalities in any of the fingers. The criminalist had previously examined the hands, I believe, at the death scene and later on at the morgue, later that night when the remains came to the morgue, and had done scrapings of the nails and looking for any foreign materials that might be helpful in determining whether there was a struggle or whether anything had occurred that would be of importance to the investigation.
Okay, and let me ask you this question. If Ms. Clarkson's hands would have been near the cylinder area of the gun or the muzzle area of the gun at the time that the gun was discharged, would you see any effects of that on her hands, any injuries that you might be able to document that would suggest that that occurred?
Yes, there would be
What would you look for?
soot, gunshot residues.
Burns?
It could be burns, yes, from the heat of...
Was there anything visible to you when you looked at that?
No.
Okay.
On that note, we're going to take our recess. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition, 15 minutes. Thank you.
Half the show
All
is
right.
getting to talk about this. I mean, he's
All
trying
right,
to
Dr.
convince
Bodden, if you would step into the hallway, please. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
the jury that she did this to herself, but we haven't gotten that.
Other psychologist that we have under subpoena, and I want to mark that and give it to the court so the court can understand what that other witness is going to be offering.
Your next is N11.
And 11.
N is an after M. N. You may. Can I point out something, folks? When we take a break, it's not only for the jurors, it's primarily for the court reporter. So I don't know how much you intend to do during this break and then delay the jury. Just have some understanding of what we're doing. I mean, Mr. Jackson wants something, Mr. Plord wants something. When is the court reporter supposed to get a break?
We can take a break now.
That's a good idea. We're going to take a break now. Thank you.
Hey, motherfucker.
Don't fuck around. All they do is fuck around, dude. Swear to God. Where are we starting next? The prosecution questions Dr. Biden outside the presence of the jury over a possible discovery violation. Great. My God. That does sound interesting, though. More interesting than what we've gotten here, which was nothing today, really. Just the facts of Lana's death, which I'm sure Dr. Pena got at. I would like to go back. It would be cool to go back and watch their testimony side by side. Because, again, it's been so long and drawn out. Everybody in here to this morning, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to do it a little shorter than normal just because I came in an hour late. Got a nice little 2-hour stretch out here. Again, keep an eye on the second channel if you do follow that for a video and a live stream tonight. But otherwise, you'll see me Tuesday night for another Murder Church. And then, of course, the book club with, it might be I don't know if it'll be we'll see what's going on. Last time I did, I think, a Koberger thing. Yeah, we went to Kick and watched the Dateline special. So I am going to be keeping up with the Koberger stuff, but then, of course, it may be a Bundy thing because I've got, again, this huge list of Bundy material on this one YouTube channel that is, I think, going to be good for Tuesday content leading into the book club. It also kind of meshes up well with Koberger with just how people are kind of talking about that online. So I don't know. Everyone, thank y'all so much. Have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of the weekend for yourselves. And let's start. If you don't see me again, start this week out by kicking its ass. Love you guys. Let's go.
This verse